Hi, welcome back to Gathering Grounds Gaming, and in this video today we're going to be continuing the theme around elevated terrain, but today we're going to do something a little bit different. So we've done a couple of really good elevated ruin pieces. Now today we're going to look at hills with, say, trees. So hills is another really good one. So with hills you can create just bare hilltops, you can create hilltops with trees, hilltops with rocks. So it gives you lots of different selections. Now today I'm going to have a little look at an example, but then I'm going to show you a couple of other examples which are similar, just to give you a little bit of height, just give you a little bit more interest. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. First of all, I just want to say thanks for coming and watching the video today. And if you've seen any of my other videos, thank you so much for coming back and having watching this one. And if you are a member, then thank you very much for subscribing. If you're not a member and you like the look of this content, or if you've seen some of my other videos and like the look of the content, please ring that bell, subscribe to the channel, and it really does help a small channel like mine to sort of grow and get out to more people. If you're wanting to support me in other ways, if you go in the description below, you can see the link to my Patreon. It starts at a couple of pounds a month, just enables me to continue doing what I'm doing. And if you want to support me in different ways, so there's also a link to my online store where I sell some of the pieces that I've either been working on in some of these videos, or I have a selection of products that I always have, say like singular trees, really popular for people when they're starting wargaming, and some different styles of ruins. And I also sell a selection of accessories like sculpted bases and things like that I've made and molded. So as I say, if you can help me out in those different ways, that'd be amazing. But as I say, if you can't do that, just continue watching these videos, continue to come back. And what I'm going to do is we'll jump down onto the pad and we'll start sketching out today's piece of terrain. Okay, so sorry, I forgot to press record when I was doing the drawing. So this is the sort of piece I was thinking about. So I'm going to talk you through it. So we're going to call it hilltop and trees. So during the piece, I want there, as we've been talking about, I want there to be like an elevated position here. Okay, so it's going to be a nice hill that comes up. It's probably going to be about 30 or 40 mil high. And I want this front to be sort of rock faces, okay? And there's going to be like a base on the bottom, so we can put foliage and sort of like bushes and that here. And then we're going to have some trees sort of on either side to create some line of sight blocking if you're behind it, or you can have like a tank in between to get some line of sight blocking from either side. But I'm going to sort of see, I might sort of use a tank for sort of or a vehicle for the sizing, and just sort of see where I can sort of how big I can sort of tuck in a tank, so you can maybe get a vehicle up here if you wanted to, and it's sort of then got cover, or you can put some troops in amongst the trees for cover. So that's what I'm thinking. I say I've got I'm going to experiment with a couple of different pieces, but this is the one I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to show a couple of other examples at the end of the video. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to get the base cut first, and we'll get some foam out, and we'll start gluing the foam down and carving it in.
So the first thing I'm going to do is I've used a 6mm plywood base. It's slightly better than the 3mm MDF. It's a bit more sturdy, and because we're going to have some heavier pieces on this, I thought it would be a better fit. So I have literally carved the edges off to make it nice and smooth. And now I'm going to use, this is 20mm foam, and because of the style of the piece, it allows me to use some of my offcuts, so I can just get them in position. I can just sort of carve them onto the base. So I want to have a nice sort of front to the piece, so I'm just going to cut this just to fit the base. There's no real big method to this, just make sure it sort of fits nicely and gives you a nice sort of gap at the front to put some rock faces on. And because I want to make this 40mm, I'm just going to add another one on top and just roughly cut it to the same size. There really, you don't have to make it nice and neat and uniform, because we are going to cut this with a hot wire cutter, and then we're going to use some sculpting mold afterwards. So there we go. Sort of fits nice and sort of slick there. And so I'm going to sort of get a hot wire cutter and sort of curve those edges off to make nice slopes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a nice space there for some rock molds at the front. So I'm just going to glue this literally down with a hot glue gun. So you can use PVA, but because I like to try and get these types of projects done in a couple of days, I'm just going to glue this down to the base. But if you do have longer, then PVA obviously will have a longer, better bond longer term. So nice and strong there, and that'll give us a nice 40mm height there. I might put a slightly bigger an extra piece on one end, but now we're going to move on to the rock molds. So these are plaster rocks. These are done with cast stone, not plaster of Paris. Cast stone is slightly stronger, and I use these pre-made rock molds. So we've got these ones are like outcroppings, and this one here is like a large cliff front. And I've actually used that today, but I've just basically just used a little shallow part of it, so it isn't so big. But these are the shallow rock molds, and you can basically, with these ones, you can stick them straight down onto the base, but they're not very high. So I'm going to use these ones here today. They're slightly deeper, and they're probably better for this project. So what I've done is I've already molded them. And the cast stone plaster makes them nice and sort of brittle when they're first molded, but they sort of go nice and strong, or like when they're dry and they're covered in paint. So it allows me just to break them and sort of fit them in where I need them, without them sort of being long term quite soft, which you do tend to get sometimes with plaster of Paris. But as I say, I've molded some of these already, so it speeds this up. But they are really good, and you can see the detail. As you can see, look here, they're still very brittle, which is good, but the detail on these is fantastic and perfect for what we want to use. So the first thing we'll do is we will literally get the piece, and we'll just start playing around with what looks good. So I think I'll probably start with the larger one here, and I think I'll just say I will probably cut this. So for now, it's just getting to have a look at what will fit nicely, and I think doing it sort of doing it this way up, and actually cutting it in half, I think will work quite nicely. So excuse the really bad health and safety here. I do end up cutting it. Probably should have put some gloves, or probably should have used a razor saw, but it's because it's quite brittle, cuts quite easily, and you should just be able to snap it in half. There we go. So that will create a nice piece there, and that fits quite nice with the slight raised piece I've added on. And don't worry about the gaps, because we will use Sculpting mold to fill in the gaps, and we will use my hot wire cutter to sort of trim down anything that doesn't quite fit. But that looks quite good there. Sort of height at one end, and I will sort of like add some extra pieces in down the edges just to blend it all in nicely. And now it's just adding some smaller pieces in. You can see that looks quite good actually there, and just getting some smaller bits to go on top. And it is literally just like a little jigsaw. Try and just play around with what you think fits, and don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. Literally, and also don't be afraid to break some of the pieces up. It wouldn't be really uniformed. And what we're going to do, we will just glue these in with some hot glue, again just for speed. And we will be using Sculpting mold to sort of and that will sort of hold them in place. But just a nice, don't cover it too much in hot glue, but just a nice amount to hold it on. don't forget just remember where you put them stone, those rock molds, because once you've taken them off, you may forget, and the glue will dry by the time you get them in place. There we go. So I've broken up some smaller pieces. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the hot wire cutter just to create the nice sort of slope down across the piece, and just to sort of bring those sort of pieces all level. And don't worry about if that rock mold sticks up slightly higher. We are going to use some Sculpting to sort of like get the level, but we're literally just going to bring it down following the actual slope of the rocks at the front, and just sort of taper them off. If you hit some hot glue, it doesn't matter, it will melt through it. It just takes a couple of moments, so don't break your hot wire cutter if it's new. Just keep doing that, and this is just a matter of just playing around, just sort of what suits you. You might want a nice big step off the back, but like me, I want it to sort of like slope nicely all the way down, so it blends nicely into like the table once it's finished. I'm just going to drag that down just to get that slope from that higher piece down to the slightly lower piece. There you go. There you go. Sort of nice slope down. Probably fill in this little step at the back just here, but it is quite a nice slope, and I think that will look nice once it's covered in a turf. So what we'll do now is we're going to use some Sculpting mold just to fill in all these gaps and just cover the whole piece, so it will be nice and solid, ready for turf. So this is what we're going to use now. Is we're actually going to use something called modeling compound. It's by Geek Gaming, but you can, if you don't have access to Geek Gaming, you can just buy Sculpting mold from any art shop. It's a very similar product to this. I just had a couple of bags of this left over from a project that I was doing. But basically what you do is you get a cup and you mix it up into that, and just mix up just small amounts because it does dry very quick. Now what you want to do is pour the modeling compound in first, and then you want to add some water and keep stirring it as you're adding the water in, because you want it to make it to the consistency of like tuna mayonnaise or like cottage cheese if you eat any of those. Not too watery but not too dry, because you basically want to have time to spread it out before it actually dries. Now I want to start by just filling all the gaps around the rock molds. I should have used a slightly bigger spatula when I was trying to tip this in, because this took me ages to scoop some of this out, and I think I give up halfway through and just tip it out of the cup straight on. But yeah, you literally just get it in your finger, and literally use your finger to sort of like maneuver it into where you want it. If you want to, you can use a sculpting tool to do this, but for this piece there's no great detail, so I just use my finger mainly, and then I use a bit of the spatula just to move it around in some of the bigger areas. But literally just keep moving it about until you're happy. Fill in all the gaps. If you don't fill in the gaps, the actual rock molds will probably pop off if there's any pressure behind them. I also think I may have made the mixture slightly too watery, so you can see it running off the back, but it's okay, it dries perfectly fine. You can use it under the rock molds as well on the base, just to make sure that the base is all blended in as well. So now we're gonna just gonna pour it onto the top, just to sort of makes the top of the piece really solid, and just covers up all that blue foam and any gaps on top of the foam. The good thing about this as well, when it starts to dry, if you've got any gaps in the rock moulds, you can actually get a sculpting tool and actually start to carve like a rock texture in. But now I'm literally just smoothing this out, so just using some water, I'm actually just going to smooth out any bumps and everything that are in the actual sculpt in the modeling compound. The great thing is, because it's like a foam, it's like a material inside plaster, it smooths out quite nicely. There you go. So that's what we've done. Just got the modeling compound sort of like blending it all in, and it's running down the back. And what I will probably do is I probably will get a little bit of filler just to fill in this gap at the back here, just because I ran out and I didn't want to mix up the amount that I would have needed. So it's just a matter of getting the back of it all just smoothed out. Like I've just done. Just now it's all dry. If there's any little blemishes or bumps, just push them down before it dries solid. Now what I've done is, the next stage is I've painted all of the top of it brown where the grass is going to go, and all the rock faces I've painted in black, and I'm going to do a dry brush of greys over the top with a little bit of brown, just to add some bit of variety and a bit of interest. I was going to do the leopard's technique on this, but unfortunately some of my black paint actually had specks of paint in it, and it actually ruined it the first time round. So I've gone with the black over the top, and I'll show you the leopard spot technique another day. So this is, if you've seen any of my videos, this is very super simple. So we go in with like a dark grey, a mid grey, and a light grey, dry brushing. As I say, if you want a bit more detail in these, I do have a one of my ruins videos goes into a bit more detail. So all I'm doing is dry brushing with like a dark grey over the top of the black, and then literally I go all the way through to a light grey, and then I'll, over the top of the light grey, I will put some brown wash, then I'll come back in with my grey. The point of this is the lighter you go, the less paint you get on your brush. That's why it's called dry brushing. So your brush is almost dry from paint before you actually start painting the piece, and it's just, you're meant to just be dragging off a little bits of paint here and there. So we're now going to do the mid green, the mid grey, sorry, and that's definitely more of a, you can see I'm sort of brushing off a lot of the paint. Okay, so I'm going to just come back in. Actually, the piece was a little bit wet when I started doing it, so I left it to dry for a little bit, and you can see already it's the actual mid grey is actually is applying a lot better now it's dry. I just didn't leave the dark grey long enough to dry in between coats. Just catching all the tops of all these stones. It'll create some nice shadows when it's finished. Okay, so there you go. And don't worry if you miss any little bits here and there, we are going to cover it over with flock, so it will look perfectly fine. So now we're going to come in with the light grey. So what this will do is this will create some lovely sort of light edges on the stones, and also give some good contrast for the shadowed areas, so like the darker areas. So only use this on the edges of the stones where you think you want to see some nice light edges and some nice sort of where maybe the sun hits the rocks, and then what that does is that just gives it some great contrast and gives the rock some real depth. If you use all the same sort of grey and don't do any sort of dark and light areas, the stonework that you've got has no depth at all, and it detracts from the realism. So as I say, just do this, take your time. And as I say, when we've done this, we'll then add some wash in, so it will sort of dull it right down, but at the moment it will create some nice effect. So now we've done that, so you can see it looks nice, and it's got some nice light areas. We're actually just going to put some brown sepia ink wash on top, straight over the top, just on the rocks. And like I said before, this is going to be really brown, so it's going to be really dark. So you're going to look at it afterwards thinking, oh my god, what have I done? But it really works. When it dries, all the brown sort of dries into all like the air, into all the cracks and crevices, and really sort of dirties up the rocks and makes it look really nice and weathered. And you can use any ink, any brown ink wash you want. You can use acrylic if you want to just mix it up with water. But this is the ink wash, so it's, as I say, it's nice and dark, as you can see. It sort of looks like it's swamped the piece a bit, but don't worry, when it dries, it will look really good. And this is after it's dried, so you can see the wash is sort of sunk in, and we're now just going to go back in with the light grey. We're actually going to do a brown, so we're going to do a light brown, and we're just going to add just a little bit more interest, because when you do the leopard spotting technique, you actually add some brown into your washes. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually do that as a dry brush instead. And we're just going to do that not all over, but just in literally in different places around the piece, just to give it a bit of interest. And you can see that this works just like a dry brush again, catches all the edges, so it just gives you some nice sort of brown areas across the stonework. There you go, you can see where it's really starting to sort of pop out. This is a Xandri dust, this colour. So now we're going to come in with a slightly darker brown, and we're going to do the same technique, but we're just going to add a little bit more brown over the top. Again, this will just give it a bit more interest. When we add the light grey over the top again, it will sort of bind them all together. There you go, you can see there, it's starting to look really good. Some nice areas, sort of brown areas that sort of pop out across the grey. And what we're going to do is just going to come straight back over. That's what that area looks like. So it just makes it pop out a bit more, like I said, gives it a bit more depth. And then we're going to come back in with just the light grey. And that's what it looks like. So what we're going to look at doing now is we're actually going to look at the ground covers. So we want to cover the front in sort of stones and sort of like some sort of loose turfs, just so it looks like some of the rock has fallen. So for this, we're going to be using some like chipped slate, and we're going to use some arid earth, which is a Geek Gaming product. And then we're going to use some Battlefield Scatter, which is a Jarvis product. So we start off with the chip slate, just to create that sort of fallen rock effect. And when you then cover all of it over with flocks, it will then just blend really nicely. So for the flocks, we're going to be using a nice mix of different greens. But to begin with, let's cover it in PVA. So we're going to do the front. We'll cover the front and the top in PVA. And then what we do is we're just going to sprinkle it wherever you just play around with it. Just sprinkle it. So this is the arid earth, and this is just very fine sort of stones just at the top. So, you know, we're going to create like a pathway and that across the top of the rocks. and then we add just a little bit in at the bottom, and then we mix that in with the chipped slate. So you can see here, just creates a nice basis for putting some stones in. This is quite fine. Don't forget to do it all the way around. Just create like where you think some of the rocks would fall. And then we've also used city rubble, which is a very light, almost like a white stone. And that just creates, again, a little bit more depth on the piece. So now we're just going to add in just a little bit of green flock at the front here, just so the stones sort of blend in, back in with like the rest of the piece. So you can sort of see, like, you know, the grassland at the bottom of like the cliff edge. And it then sort of makes the stones next to it sort of pop out against the green. And then we can add a little bit on the top as well. So what you want to do is also, while you're doing this, make sure you capture the edges of the base. So otherwise, basically, you have a lovely sort of top of the base all nice and covered, but the edge of it is still then either brown or the colour of the plywood. So just make sure that you press in all the little bits on the edges. And there you go. So that's the first sort of section done. And then you can see I've dropped in lots of like battlefield scatter from Jarvis, which is the bigger stones and bigger pieces. Just gives it lots of interest. And now what we're going to do is we're going to flock the top. So we're going to do this in 3 sections. So again, Geek Gaming they're called foam scatters. So you can see here, there's got very fine bits of foam in it, but also chunky bits. So we start off with like a light green. It's like an olivey green. And we just sprinkle it over, leaving some gaps. And then we come in with the same style of flock, but it's a dark green. Make sure you put the pot underneath so you can catch any that falls off, so you don't waste any. Then you come in with something called, it's a green blend. So it's a blend of a few different colours. So it just means doesn't become patchy. You sprinkle this over the top and it blends the 2 colours really nicely together. And just add, so this is called Forest Path. So what this does is it sort of, you sprinkle it over the top of the green flock and it creates like a pathway where maybe like miniatures or, you know, like armies would have walked up the hill. So it creates like a little like grass path. So you can see here, just blends the rocky texture from the top into the grass and I'll create like a little path running down the back of the hill. So now I've added, so this is from Woodland Scenics. So this is like it's called Shrubs. So it's like a thick foam. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually use isopropanol and matte varnish. So it's this PVA, water and matte varnish. And that's going to basically put the isopropanol over the top, and then you drop the matte varnish on top. And this is the piece sort of done after it's been left to dry. As you can see, like the pathway sort of visible there. And I've just left this for a whole day just to dry, and I did 2 layers. And it looks really good, and as I say, it's all really hard, and you can see here all the miniatures sort of balance nicely on top. And now we're going to add the trees. So this is a bit where you again get to play around depending on how dense you want the trees to be. So what we do is I want trees to be on either side of the piece, not in the middle. And we're going to use a bradawl that we basically just poke holes in the piece. So you don't do it too hard, so just press in just enough for the tree to go in. And then just, as I say, when you're happy, just put the hole in and just sort of place them in. And just get an arrangement. So lots of trees together, you sort of do little bunches of trees. So you sort of do like a large one. I normally do like a medium one and a small one and maybe another medium one. Just to create like a little collection of trees. So they're not all like really tall all the way across the piece. It gives it a bit of interest. Now I'm using like a Sherman tank from Bolt Action just to, because I use it for different things, just to create like the spacing. And I've just sort of like, there you go. So you can lift the tank out, but it's nicely covered. And how we glue these in, so I'm just going to use like a strong glue, an old tub I've got. Just going to push the ends of the trees into the bottle, squeeze the bottle just to coat the bottoms of the trunks of the trees, and I'm just going to push them back in the holes and just leave them to dry, and they will dry rock solid. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some grass turfs on. So I use a company called Tashima One. They're based in Cornwall, but you can use any brand you've got. And these are fantastic though. They do a nice range of colours and sizes. They've got bushes here and flowers, and it's going to add just a little bit of texture and a bit of interest. We don't need to do many, but just adds a bit of interest around the piece in different places, at the bottom and at the top. And there you go. So we're just going to add a few different colours in, a few different greens, just to give it a little bit of variation around the piece. And you can use these for a diorama, or you can drop them in and actually use them for like, as I say, just for your wargaming or your Dungeons and Dragons. But they work well for either. And these are the finished pieces. So this is the one we've just been working on. I've also got a couple of other examples. So you've got a slightly lower one there. And this one here is almost just all greenery. It's just got a couple of rocks at the end. But again, they give you some nice variation and some nice height for your wargaming.
So I hope you enjoyed that video today. I really love videos like this where you get to explore some of the different styles of pieces that you can make, but also I love being able to make pieces that really incorporate some of the mechanics from the games. Like having been a GM, but also being a player within games, I love to be able to use like some of the mechanics that the company lay down for you. So, and you know, height and elevation is like one of the key elements for quite a few different games I play. So it's, you know, it's really important. And I've got like, but you don't have to go for like really tall elevation. So here's another sort of piece that I sort of showed you, and it's literally just some rolling rocks that come down onto the piece, and you know, a lower slope at the back. You know, stuff like that you can do, and you don't have to use rock molds. You know, they're expensive to buy. You can use things like bark. You can buy bags of bark like online. You can buy them at sort of pet shops, and you get quite a lot of them, and they make really good rock effects. I haven't got any videos yet, but I will see, if I remember, link a video down below, because I also use bark when I'm doing rocks, depending on the environment that I'm using. So that's another really good sort of piece to sort of experiment with. But as I say, you know, if you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as I say, the next video that's coming, I'm going to show you how to make some singular trees that can be used with these pieces. So make sure you watch out for that. But otherwise, until the next time, I look forward to seeing you.